This is, it seems to me, the perfect season to talk about hope. Many of us will need to keep hope in mind when the family gathers around the dinner table this holiday season. Maybe just hope that that one uncle won't start a flame out over politics. But beyond all that, the earth itself seems to call us to remember hope this time of year. Our forebears sensed that we needed this when they decided, against all apparent reason, to light candles for 8 nights, or to bring evergreen trees inside and place lights on them at the darkest time of year. Historian Gabriela Kalapas writes, "The Christmas tree with its green foliage has its origins in the very ancient belief that at the time of the winter solstice, when all of nature seemed dead, evergreen trees were one of the few remaining signs that nature was still alive. During the winter solstice, the Norse and the Druids would hold rituals in the woods and decorate the branches of the evergreens with candles, cakes, apples, and other such gifts. Eventually, we started bringing trees inside, of course. These winter holidays and their symbols, trees and lights and gifts in the darkest time of year, are a ritual statement of faith that as it has every year for eons, the sun will again beat back the darkness in time. Spring will come again, and with it, hope. It has served as a metaphor for life in general, that though there are troubling and difficult seasons, ultimately hope can return." We've celebrated these holidays as defiant commitments to hope in the worst of times. In years marked by war, by national chaos, political upheaval, people have gathered to quietly celebrate what, even in the midst of terrible tragedy, is good and right about humanity. Families gather for holidays even after the loss of a loved one to tell stories and remember better times, maybe as a way of reminding themselves that there will be more good times to come. Hope whispers to the human heart that all might someday be well again, and we ritualize hope's presence among us. What do we do when we don't feel it? When hope hides from us? When our spirits feel as cold and dark as the long nights of December and January, must we then pretend to feel something we don't, just because it's the holiday season? There's a cultural definition of hope that I find completely useless. In my generation, and maybe they're still around, this was symbolized perfectly by Hopeful Heart Care Bear. No, don't get too fond. The description of this annoying little creature goes like this. Hopeful Heart Bear is brimming with hope and happiness. She knows a positive outlook is very important. Hopeful Heart Bear always looks on the bright side and knows how to share her hopeful ways with others. Oh. I often rooted for Grumpy Bear to knock Hopeful Heart Bear off her little cloud. Oh my goodness. Now this definition of hope won't do, I think, in the real world, certainly not when things look bleak. It is ridiculous and counterproductive, frankly, to go around pretending we're happy when we aren't. And although we live in a culture that's largely avoidant of difficult emotion, a culture that encourages us to avoid expressing ourselves in any way that might even mildly trouble someone near us, it is counterproductive to fake it. It costs us, because when we project that we're joyful, people will believe us, and they'll deal with us as if we're telling the truth about how we're feeling. And after a while, the old trope, "nobody really knows who I am," will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the play acting that was supposed to make us friends can isolate us from real friendship. Now, there are levels of sharing, of course. Bearing our souls to everyone we meet is no good either. But as a rule, constantly bluffing joy does more harm than good. What then to do when hope seems a long way off. For one, we can find companions who nurture our faith. Here's what Anne Lamott, the author Anne Lamott, had to say about this in her book, Plan B, Further Thoughts on Faith. She said the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until the light returns. Faith also means reaching deeply within for the sense one was born with. The sense, for example, to go for a walk. End quote. So Anne Lamott urges us, find the right person or the right group of people with whom to share the truth that this holiday season or in this political moment or because I am grieving a personal loss, I'm just not feeling hope right now. The best companions, of course, are able to simply listen, not to offer advice, simply to walk beside us until such time as hope begins to reappear. But there's something else a seasoned companion can do. They might suggest to us, after we've told our story and we know we've been heard, that if we keep on, things will get better. Hope will reappear. That suggestion is sometimes met with a demand for a geometric proof. Prove to me, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that hope is still out there. We want to know, how can you be sure that hope will return? We want to be certain. It's a good question, and the answer isn't all that satisfying, because we can't. We can't be sure. Walking the path of hope in hard times requires some faith. Not blind faith, not faith that some divine figure will make it all better. Specifically, faith that hope persists someplace unseen, in the underground of our spirit, like the roots of a plant in the wintertime, ready to grow when the time is right. Faith rooted in the evidence that hope has reappeared again and again and can for us too in time. Sometimes our troubles are so much with us that we lose sense of perspective. Like standing too close to an impressionist painting, we can only see the dots, not the way they might connect to make a bigger picture. That has sometimes been the case for me and in the not-so-distant past. It seems antithetical, I know, but for me, remembering that I, like all others, will someday die, really meditating on that fact and getting the truth of it in my bones bolsters my sense of hope. That sounds strange, doesn't it? I sound strange fairly often. But it does that because it gives me a sense of perspective. I can tend to take myself and my circumstances too seriously sometimes, remembering my limited place in the cosmos, looking up at the sky, way out in the superstitions in the middle of the night. Remembering my limited place in the cosmos brings me back to reality and gets me ready to do the work I can do to make a difference. Perspective is important. As I learned when I was in 6th grade and won the Needmore Elementary School Spelling Bee. Yes, that was the name of my elementary school. Besides the glory that was afforded me by the certificate I was awarded in front of the entire assembled student body, this meant that I would be a contestant in the countywide spelling bee on WBIW 1340 on your AM dial. This was my big shot at fame, and I figured fortune couldn't be far behind. So I spent evenings hunched over this list of words that I might be asked to spell with everyone I knew listening. Studying, restudying, pacing around the house, spelling and respelling the hundreds of words. Arduous. The process of preparing for the spelling bee was arduous. A-R-D-U-O-U-S. But with time, and with some studying help from parents and friends, I began to feel more and more confident until finally the day arrived. We showed up early, dark early, at the radio station where they herded all of us students into a bare room with folding chairs and a microphone. And one by one, They called us up to the mic and gave us a word to spell. Finally, our next contestant is Andy Burnette from Needmore Elementary. My heart was in my throat as my knees wobbled. I walked up to the microphone and was asked to spell the word malign. Oh my God, I did not remember this word from the list at all. So my brain said stall, and I said, use it in a sentence, please. And the moderator spoke a sentence. I remember it had something about witches in it, but I could hardly hear him. Repeat it, please, I begged. I was shaking. He did, and I still didn't remember the spelling. Finally, I just had to take a shot. M-A-L-L-I-N-E. You all know how to spell it. No, he said. He was sorry, but that wasn't right. And my dreams of a future funded by spelling bee winnings were dashed. Some who knew me were convinced that there was a conspiracy afoot. The Pentecostal preacher's kid was given a word about hatred and evil, and the example included witches. Surely the devil was at work in the hearts of the Lawrence County spelling bee uppity-ups. But for the most part, I noticed that the adults weren't quite as shaken as I was. They comforted me. They showed me by their example that life might one day be worth living again. My despair was not their despair. And having these calm but comforting companions ultimately helped. It seems silly now. It didn't feel all that silly at the time, but I think there's a reminder here that I can still benefit from as an adult. It's the same thinking behind 12-step groups and grief support groups, and even in a way gatherings like this one. It is old wisdom found in many cultures. Sometimes the wisdom of the elders, not necessarily those older than us, but those who have been through the fire, is essential for maintaining hope. When we are struggling, the answer is usually somewhere in relationship, community, storytelling. Companionship is so important in the toughest times. Author Scott Russell Sanders, whom I quoted once and realized to my horror he was in the congregation, is part of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Bloomington, Indiana. He wrote the book Hunting for Hope after learning that his constant negativity about the peril of our lack of concern for the environment was the peril that has us in. He realized that his negativity was contributing to his son's depression. So for his children and for his own survival, Sanders decided he needed to find a way to stay in touch for hope, with hope. The entire book, Hunting for Hope, is fantastic. It's full of stories and thinking about maintaining a hope that keeps us at work doing good in the world. He ends with a story from a cold January morning in Bloomington, Indiana, where he lives. He wrote, every half hour or so throughout the morning, I interrupt whatever else I'm doing to line up a plastic jug beneath the downspout where I'm catching snow melt from the roof to use in watering our houseplants. When I've gathered 5 gallons, Ruth signals to me through the front porch window with a laugh I can see but not hear that I needn't fill any more jugs. Still wearing the laugh on her face, she opens the door and hands me a brown envelope. Here, she says, if you're looking for excuses to stay outside, why don't you plant Jack in the pulpits? Isn't it too cold, I ask? The seeds need the cold now, she said, so they can recognize spring when it comes. So I put the envelope in my back pocket, and with a hoe I clear a spot in the snow near the base of our tulip tree in the front yard. I loosen the black soil and scatter the bright red seeds of Jack in the pulpit. As I'm covering the seeds with dirt and leaves and tamping them down with my boots, I do not merely remember, I feel the root meaning of hope, to leap up in expectation. Memory grips the past, as my friend wrote to me, and hope grips the future. I think of the scarlet seeds quietly burning against the cold black dirt, waiting for spring. I think of my children and of the children they may have one day, and of those children's children, on and on like ridge upon ridge of mountains stretching out before me as far as I can see. I think of my students, hard at work learning what our clever species has already discovered and adding their own knowledge to the store. I imagine the host of ancestors, human and non-human, whose lives and labors have made this moment possible for those of us who breathe. I draw a breath, savor it, and bless them all. He is still realistic about the condition of things. Scott Russell Sanders is a great advocate for the environment. But in the end, Sanders is able to see hope again. So here's my encouragement for us. When hope doesn't come, look around, connect, fight the allure of a retreat that ends in isolation and despair. Plant a handful of seeds and know that they will grow. Waiting for hope often isn't easy, but know this: you are loved, you are connected, you are worthy, and life is and will be worth the living. Amen.